a familiar. Sure that you as a musician are familiar with the with that whole the perfect take is the one you never recorded type thing.
Of course, yes, yes. And
So
yeah, I have a few videos on my channel that discuss the peculiarities of recording. You
mm,
know, the recording that you make, but it doesn't get recorded, right? And it's like the
yeah,
perfect take. Or yeah,
yeah.
there's lots of interesting features about that. Give me just a moment. I've got a little piece of food for breakfast here and my
No
coffee.
problem. No problem at all. No problem
Yeah,
at all.
give me
You
just a
wish.
moment. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience.
No problem.
Such a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm
Yeah.
super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been quite often sort of as I'm about to doze off at night, I've been quite often putting on some of your online podcasts and
Oh,
kind of
really?
absorbing quite a few of the things, you know, that you've been speaking about, which is really good. I mean, it's really good. I've seen you, you know, you sort of gradually building and building what you're doing, you know, and introducing more and more concepts. And I think that's really, you know, it's really, I find it really interesting because I mean, all of the things that you're speaking about are topics that I've had a great interest in myself.
Mm.
You know, and you're expressing them obviously in very different ways to perhaps how I would normally approach them, but in many ways you're not as well. And so I'm kind of anticipating that what we will probably end up doing through this meeting is sort of hopefully filling in little bits that we normally can't access in our own brains, so to speak,
Mm.
you know, as
Yeah.
isolated units, but sort of
Okay.
find a way of opening up new ways of looking at some of the things that you've been researching.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed with your work, and I think I've known about you for about what, 8, 10 years or something like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, it must be at least 9 years, I think. Yeah, because I've been doing public courses around about 10 years now, and I remember you being there right at the beginning. You sort of
Yeah,
made some comments and things
I was just
right at
absolutely excited to find someone who knew anything at all about mesmerism, right?
right,
There
okay.
are no, I mean, there might be one or two other people, um, but
Hmm.
yeah, just really uncommon. Hypnosis itself is a topic that fascinates me, has for a long
Yeah.
time. Um, During a non-ordinary experience, it seems, I mean, the language is tricky here, but I acquired the capacity to hypnotize people pretty much instantly without knowing what I was doing, without knowing even that the hypnosis was involved. And
Hmm.
I don't know exactly what was going on there. It wasn't until later I took a class on hypnosis and I got hypnotized for the first time, and I hypnotized someone else, quote unquote, that I realized, like, oh, this has been going on around me without me knowing it for some time. And what a strange feature of our human composition. Why?
Yeah.
I mean, I have like a million questions to ask you, because it's such a fascinating and bizarre. Where does this come from? Why is it there? I mean, all of these questions you must have pursued these very deeply, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I think you and I look at these subjects in a quite similar way. Um, for example, I've heard you talk a lot about time and about the altering of time. The modification of time,
Mhm.
which is obviously something that you relate to martial arts,
Mhm.
but it's also something that you relate to, um, for example, the action of a snake. I mean, being a very, very good example, because the snake is very well known to be sort of, first of all, changing the perception of time in relation to the awareness of its own bodily movements, and then as a result of the awareness of its own bodily movements, then comes a sudden strike.
Uh-huh.
So the observer is obviously changing their own perception of time, because if an object or a person moves in a different manner to what you would normally expect somebody or something to move, it immediately changes the perception of time of the individual, which may at first be a propedetic thing in terms of it being something which is there to, like, it acts as like a prop.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, so the hence the word propedetic, but the propedetic is like the thing that's in place of something else which is real. So there's the preliminary propedetic thing, of the movement may at first be something that suggests, because as we know, hypnosis is very much about suggestion, but the
Yes, but
particular type of,
sorry, whenever I speak, it's a bit of um, when I first begin to speak, there's a loud noise from the other side.
ah,
It's a little bit
okay,
disturbing. It
okay.
throws me off because I can't tell if it's distorted over there.
No, you're coming across perfectly well here.
Okay, great. Um, and there's so many different features here. So you're talking about something that I'm going to call, for lack of a better phrase, consciousness leading, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so it's setting a tempo and a
yes,
cadence and a
yes,
form. There are forms,
yes,
shapes in a way, right?
yes.
And human consciousness naturally, I think of it almost like a liquid, right? I don't know
Right.
if this is a useful way that you may also conceive of it, and I'm very
Well,
interested in
I mean, Mesmer himself was somebody who regarded it as a fluidum.
yeah, this is
So
the
a
weird
liquid,
thing.
a fluid.
Yeah, because I rarely hear moderns speak this way at all.
Yeah,
Um, it seems to me like a fluid that is structured or influenced, if you will, the shape
yes,
of its flow, the modes of its flow, very differently during our waking world experience than from what we might experience during dreaming. And I mean, hypnosis is, or trance states. And when I say that, I'm thinking of a broad spectrum of different
yeah,
kinds of possible trance states. Um, Even in a blatantly obvious way, there's the difference between, uh, uh, I'm in a very light trance, which quite frankly, just even speaking together starts to become a little bit trance-like immediately.
yes,
when we begin to match up our flow forms and tempos and things like this, right? Already there's a light trance going on, and from that to awake but entranced. And again, there's lots of different slices of this pie, so to speak. Yes. There's even different pies, right? It's not just one pie, right? But yeah, from that to more bordering on sleep or unconsciousness, and then completely out cold, and some different spectrums in there. Do you see it similarly? Say something about how you see the range of possibilities, please.
The range of possibilities. Well, I mean, one of the things that was that I was becoming aware of while I was listening to you just now is the fact that yes, there's different types of it's different forms of awareness, or becoming more and more aware. In a sense, becoming more aware. But interestingly, you can become more aware in a very limited way, or you can become more aware in a very, very expansive way. So for example, even if I was to be speaking to someone, staring straight into their eyes and saying something which seems to limit the awareness, of course we could stretch our awareness into everything else that's outside of us at the same time. So we could be listening to the birds in the distance, or like what somebody's saying on the other side of the street or just outside the earshot. There's so many ways you can be focused and peripheral at the same time.
Beautiful.
And that is a form of trance, but a form of trance is only a heightened state of awareness, isn't it?
Yeah, it would seem to be. It's so weird why I keep getting this echo. I hope it's not on the recording, but it probably is.
No, it's not. It's not. I can't hear that.
Yeah, I mean, on my side, I just don't sort of know which side the recording side is, but for the moment, we'll just go along and presume that it's okay. It's only in right. It's after you've been speaking, and then the first moment that I speak, there's a distortion.
Like a glitch.
Yeah, kind of. Okay, so visually, we have ideas like foveal vision, which is your central vision, and peripheral vision. And often if someone comes to me and they say like, well, what do you mean by trance? I'll just teach them to spread their gaze. Like relax your central vision so that your focus becomes on the outer. It gently relaxes into the outer thing. Right? And as some people know, which I think is a really interesting sort of mechanical feature of both vision and awareness. If you're looking at the night sky and you gaze spread, you will see very dim stars, which when you turn your foveal vision to them, disappear, right? Can't see them by looking at them. And this is a very interesting idea, because who would presume that there are things that you cannot see by looking at them?
A classic example is the Pleiades. The Pleiades can usually only be seen with the peripheral vision. And when you look at it, you don't see the light that you see from the corner of your eye. This is something I noticed a long time ago. Yes,
it's very profound because of what it portends about both vision and consciousness. Right. Certainly, we would all think that in order to see something, I have to look at it, right? But I mean, there are other features of this as well. If two people are passing on the street, they may choose to connect very directly, visually, glance at each other's eyes, exchange a smile, whatever. But as a man, if an attractive woman is walking by, I'm well aware that if I look at her, it's not going to go well, probably, right? So what I want to do is not to look at her, and thus give her the chance to glance at me or see me without being seen to be seeing me. And this kind of thing is human awareness of observation is incredibly nuanced, unimaginably ancient, right? Observation turns out to be really profoundly instructive of the structure and activity and forms of consciousness, right?
Right, yes. I would go so far as to add to what you've just said and say that by not, the example you just gave with another individual, sometimes, yes, if the awareness is not too directed to the person directly, then you allow the opportunity, you give the opportunity to the other to feel what's there rather than look directly at it. If you look directly at it, a rather large part of the attention to other capacities of other modes of recognition start to perhaps dissipate. So sometimes we feel the energy coming from other beings. I'm sure that sometimes when you've been walking in the park and you've been very, very quiet and very attentive at the same time, like you could, if you're completely open, you will eventually begin to feel, even if you pass a certain tree or if you pass a certain plant, you can begin to feel it. But again, this comes from certain types of practice or certain types of openness, or through meditative practices, we can actually sort of find interesting ways to have this experience, which I think in the modern world is somewhat quashed.
Yeah, quashed or counterfeited, or what? Yeah, I don't know the word for when you turn food into garbage, right? Like, right.
Yeah.
So, yes, of course, we may sense energy, the character of not just the flow of life force, but also the life forces, but also the affinity, the sort of manifold of affinities and perhaps disaffinities, right? The
Right.
manifold of relational opportunity, call and response, rejection, invitation, all of these things, yeah. And okay, yeah, I have a million questions. So we're sort of just diving in here, which I feel fine with as long as you're
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable. Yeah.
Right. Can you tell me anything you want to share about how you became interested in this topic? How did you end up being the man, the mind, the myth, the legend that you have become?
Right. Okay. Um, from walking, I started walking. I did a walk, which in England is known as the coast to coast walk, where you start on the west. I started on the west coast of England and walked all the way across the west coast, which is takes you through the Lake District, through the Lake District Mountains, and then over into the Pennine Mountains, which is otherwise known as the backbone of England because it's like a mountain ridge which runs like a spine through England's shape is a bit like a hand.
Hmm.
And the Pennine Ridge sort of runs up the centre of the hand, sort of thing. And then you've got Scotland up here, you've got Cornwall down here, and London sort of down here, you know. But yeah, the Pennine Ridge runs up the centre, and then on the west you've got the Lake District Mountains, Pennine Ridge, and then on the east side you've got this vast swathe of moorland called the North Yorkshire Moors. Walking directly across there was sort of the pivotal point in time that I can say really switched me on. And how it happened was, first of all, I was totally immersed in nature. I didn't take any public transport anywhere. I used my feet the whole way from one side to the other. I just had a tent on my back and woke up, uh, had my breakfast, got my tent back on my back, and then carried on walking. And it took about just over 2 weeks to do it. But I was pretty, full on walker. And as I was walking, not only did I encounter many significant places upon the land itself, such as stone circles, which I would camp beside, and things like this, which I'd never really encountered before. But also the sheer exhilaration of standing on the tops of, huge mountains, and also, walking under the stars, camping under the stars. For the first time, I mean, a real major experience happened with the Milky Way, where I suddenly felt the whole expanse above me and literally felt it viscerally running right through me, right into the earth. And I suddenly felt completely connected, like a continuum, like there was no separation. Um, and this was, and just walking every day and breathing and observing and listening and not being engaged in too much conversation, really did plunge me into quite a depressive state when I returned back to London, because at that time I was living in London, and to be plunged and immersed so much in this type of state of just walking in nature every day, and then having to go back to London, plunged me deeply into the dream world, which was interesting, which started to happen while I was actually on the walk. Somehow my dreams became much more vivid, much more accessible. But when I came to London, I started to get some very, very unusual dreams, where I think you yourself have indicated about certain communications you started to receive from what we might call other realms, so to speak.
Sure.
Well, this sort of started happening at this time, and all I can say is that on a practical level, my spatial awareness, the sense of my physical body existing within this continuum of nature, plus the dreams which attended the switching on of this state, plus the fact that the breathing and the movement and my sense of my body and my spatial awareness started to cause me to realize that there was a direct connection between my perception of time and other people's perception of time. Which, again, as a dancer or as a musician or a stage performer or a martial artist, all of these people will have this sense, whether they can articulate it or not. Have I begun to answer your question?
Yes. In order to attempt to avoid the echo, I'm going to try to put my headset on and see if this affects it. So just give
Yeah,
me a moment. And I have not lost the thread. I'm
no.
preserving the thread of the conversation in my awareness. Just give me a moment here. Past. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and hopefully that will solve the problem that you're talking about, because it sounds like a feedback problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That's why I'm hoping this could
Hmm.
possibly help us here. All right, so I want to go back to the last thing you said, and then we'll rewind a bit to the
Yeah,
beginning of your journey and stuff.
yeah.
Um, since about 2018, I've become very concerned with what I've experienced as a series of transformations. Actually, the end of 2018, and um, without going too much into the personal bit of it, it became like what triggered my awareness and why I became concerned had to do with changes in my sleep and dreaming, which turned out, at first I thought like, oh, this is just something local to me. It's a problem with Darren. But as I began to reach out and talk to other people, not everyone, but I encountered people who had had the same experience, right, at the same time, a series of problems, right, that match up in each of the different people that I spoke with. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe it's just something local to where I live. No, there's people in Europe, there's people in Asia that I've spoken with that have the same sort of story. And that made me very concerned about what might have a causal role in what was going on, like what is going on, trying to understand it in some way. And one day I came across this book at random. I think it was called The Bipolar Survival Guide. And in this book, for the first time, I was introduced to two concepts for which there are German words: Zeitgeber and Zeitstorer. And when I hear you talking about the relation, when you're in public and you're walking around, and the temporal relationships there, okay, the weird thing is the experiences you describe, I could see them from the angle that you are actually becoming a walking Zeitgeber. You are a local being, a being who is becoming a point of synchronization. And that synchronization, I mean, that's almost the definition of trance, right? Is that you get
Mhm.
certain streams of consciousness synchronized in a particular way.
Yes.
This is how we go to sleep. If they don't sync up, if those streams don't sync up, we can't sleep, right? Or we can't remain asleep. And one of the things I discovered over the past few years, which I find kind of mind blowing, first of all, that the circadian rhythms are complex rhythms. It's not a rhythm, it's like a
Yeah.
symphony of streams that when they work well, they work very well, right? And it's reminiscent of a snake, actually, or many
Right.
snakes forming
Right.
one snake or something like this.
Right. Right.
And then when they don't work well, there's like two or three straggling snakes. Now the others begin to struggle and so forth. Um, but what I found very surprising was that there are something that I will refer to as oniric rhythms,
Right. Right. Yes.
the dreaming rhythms.
Yes.
And these
Yes.
also are symphonic. They are multi-stream. They have to flow together. They come together, and the coming together of them, if you have experience and consciousness of it, is usually very bizarre, right? It's not like a mind state that would be familiar to common people, and there are often very strange images and or what correspondences in awareness as sort of the beginning of the snake is starting to come together from multiple strands, right? And I mean, there's so much richness here, but without getting too lost in the woods. Um, so what surprised me, what never had occurred to me is even possible, but it's something that I have experienced, and I hope no one has such an experience. It's possible for the oniric rhythms to break away from the circadian rhythms, so that the snake doesn't form when you're in circadian like sleep. And in order for it to form, you have to basically like stay asleep for a whole nother period after, you know, your sleep period, right? Because, for example, let's say your normal circadian rhythms are from, say, I don't know, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something, right? And so somewhere in there is usually where your oniric rhythms are active and healthily doing their thing. But that can get displaced so that your oniric rhythms are trying to form like 8, 9, 10 a.m., 11, or even later, right? And mine actually flipped over into the afternoon, which was miserable. It's like not, and it went through a variety of phases, and it was pretty scary, actually. There was no dreaming at first, there was sleep disruption, there was dreaming in blackness, no visual, having dreams, but no. And then, so I've been trying to understand this, and what I realized is that it relates to Zeitgebers and Zeitstorers, things that contribute to synchronization and things that disrupt synchronization.
Right. Okay. What would you believe caused the synchronization, and what would you believe disrupts the synchronization?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a mystery, and
Yeah.
I've been trying to understand this for a long time. I've talked with a variety of different people. Like I said, not everyone's affected similarly,
Mm-hmm.
but a surprising number of people sensed something at the end of 2018, particularly, that gave
Yeah.
them a sense of doom, actually. And I had this a
So of what? Sorry.
sense of doom,
A
like
sense of doom. Right.
impending doom, right? And
Right.
I had a sense like this very strongly for a couple of weeks. Um, and then sleep cycle disruption, dream disruption, loss of motivation. And the story is really similar among probably at least 20 people I've spoken with over this time, maybe
Right.
more. And there are groups of people who've been discussing this, but they don't know. It's very difficult to get a handle on what the hell's going on because we don't talk about these things, right? Now that's a big side story, and I'm sorry for leading us
Mm.
off to the.
No. I see all of this as being relevant to whatever it is we're exploring.
Okay, great, thank you. So one of the things that occurred to me is that the experience that you had on your walk, which by the way has some sort of classic features, right? And one of those
Right.
features is that you become a connection point between the sky and the
Yes.
earth.
Yes.
And so the history of the sky, right, which is a totally strange kind of thing compared to the history of the earth, because it's infinitely rich, deep, complex, ancient. And then the history of the earth, you're actually doing this thing that I'm talking about when I say Zeitgeber, right?
Right.
You're acting as a point of synchronization between what I might call celestial time
Mm-hmm.
and the vast landscape down here of terrestrial time. And it's hilarious. It's actually humorous to hear you say things like, you know, I would walk past these stone circles and stuff. I was like, wait, okay, really? Because what you're almost like acting as a temporal lightning rod, right? Which is a two-way thing. It allows
Yeah.
the communication from the earth to the sky, and
Uh-huh.
also, okay, so, and then you come back
Right.
into society, right? You come back into like the city, which is so ridiculous
Yeah. I felt
because,
like I've been ripped open when I came back. Really.
I mean, say more about that, that feeling so that I can understand what you mean by ripped open.
Well, when you're living in a very, very, in a completely urban environment, like in London at the time, you sort of develop a thick skin. I think because you have to,
It's true.
and so by going into these places and walking every day in this completely natural environment, with just a tent as my home. I suppose it was like I shed a lot of skins, if you want to put it in that snake analogy again.
Mhm.
A lot of skin shedding.
But in this case, the echo's really weird. The headphones aren't stopping it. So in this case, though, it's also armor, right? It's like
Yes,
it's layers
right.
of buffering
Yes,
protection, right? So
yes.
it's not just like a developmental. Yes, please continue.
Yeah, yeah. So I literally felt like all of those layers had been ripped open.
Mm.
Or should I say, if I'd have stayed in that environment, maybe it wouldn't have had the same effect. But returning directly back into London and getting on with ordinary everyday life after such an experience was quite a shock, because I could literally feel everything around me
Mm.
in a really painful way. I could feel people's anxiety, people's fear, people's tension. I could feel all of these things coming at me, like as if I was completely open to it. And so I didn't find that very pleasant at all, and so started to feel rather ill. And I even went to the doctors, sort of, I don't know what I have here, but it feels like I'm sort of coming down with a terrible flu or something like this that won't go away. And then it sort of got worse. The doctor couldn't find anything wrong with me, and it got worse. And I ended up going into what you might call like quite a classic state of depression, where I was couldn't really get out of bed. And I started to dream a lot. But every time I was dreaming, I would see a specific landscape which kept recurring in my dreams. And it was a specific hill with a path going up the hill. And at the top of the hill, there was a sweeping view down into some cornfields from quite a high place, and with a river. And the river was flowing to the left. How do I know this? I know this because I walked down the hill and there was a boat waiting for me. And inside the boat, there was this feminine figure, almost like a goddess type of figure, just waiting for me. And I would get into the boat every day, and then she'd take me down the river. And every time I got, and not a word was spoken between us. And every time I got into the boat and we drifted down the river, I woke up filled with energy, filled with a sense of incredible vitality, and a feeling of like I was literally coming back to life. Now, the reason why I say this is because this, your question, plugs right into lots and lots of the points I've heard you speaking about. We've been talking a lot about, you've been talking a lot about, well, there's so many things I can pull here together. You've been talking a lot about medicine. Right. Now, as far as I've become aware, this whole, I say whole, this whole, this holy, this whole holy concept of the medi, as you speak, that which is goes between the worlds, the medium, as in the like you have it in such words as Mediterranean, the Middle Earth, the place in the middle, the media, the point of communication betwixt one point and another, the threshold. This is the place where the healing takes place. So the alteration of consciousness through the alteration of our concept of time, because time is the measure. And so I've noticed you've been working a lot with ideas of the equivalence of words. Now, of course, words, communication, are all in the realm of the Lord of communication and the Lord of medicine, being the healer, being the mercurial essence. So the Mercury, so we're talking about the snakes and that whole thing with the dreaming and the waves you were talking about. The honoric realm is clearly the realm of the Asclepian realm.
I mean, say more what you mean by Asclepian, just so that people who are listening might.
Okay, so the Asclepian realm is the realm that Asclepius, the healer, would actually work with the snakes to actually bring people into a state of dream. So sometimes, and I think this answers, or at least makes a commentary on some of the things and some of the attitudes you've had yourself. In the end, it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters whether things are actually literally true or not.
May I say something about that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, brilliant. This is a very confusing point for moderns. And part of the reason why it's confusing is because there is actual danger, right?
Yes.
There's danger. What is the danger comprised of? It's comprised of something that resembles someone telling you something and then posing it as true when it is not true.
Right.
So that's one kind of the danger. And this is the danger that we face with cults and ideologies and specific intentional misstructurings of cognition, understanding, awareness, thought, concern, fear, hope, right? Intentional manipulation of these snakes, if you will, these streams, right, in our consciousness. And that's a real danger, okay?
Yes.
And then there's this other really weird problem, which I think is more or less masculine, even though apparently circa 2024, one's not supposed to say words like masculine or feminine anymore. You get a lot of trouble for this, but I'm willing to take the risk here because I think these ideas still have useful importance, and that we can demonstrate that. But a masculine problem is, as men, we are often trained to immediately dispose of something that we can determine that isn't true. Right? Someone says blah blah blah, we're like, that's not true. It's not. Right? End of the thing. Right? Owen Barfield, in a book called Saving the Appearances, which is incredibly amazing, one of the few books that I commonly blather on about, talks about this Greek sense of theoria versus what happened post-Galileo. And theoria is concerned with what is good for seeing. It helps you to see. Okay? It's not concerned at all with whether it is the same as phenomena as experienced. Right? And the problem with Galileo, according to Barfield, was not that he was saying the Earth orbits the sun. That had been being said for a long time. The problem with Galileo is that he was saying there's a new kind of truth, right? And it's a truth that the church can't control. It's a truth of the symmetry between a theory and observables. It is predictive, right? This is what the church is terrified of. This is why they, persecuted him, according to Barfield. Now, this is where I'm going to come back to, I think, the spirit of what you were sharing. And this is so exciting. I'm like completely on fire right now. There are forms of truth that are more profound than facts.
Right.
And some of those forms of truth are actually approach not just the mystical, but that which lifts us above our common human experience, awareness, ability, faculties, understandings. And these kinds of truths are often, I think there's actually a part of consciousness in most of us that immediately recoils from them and just is like, you're not supposed to know that. No one's, you're not, that's not, you can't go around saying things like this. And one of my friends was asking me, somebody who's kind of studying with me, and he's very curious, and I'm very curious, and we have, as you say, like, there's a synergy that happens where we both get outside what we've known before, and I love, this is an amazing aspect of our humanity. And he was saying, so, why, what do you mean by forbidden knowledge? Who's forbidding it, right? It's a very natural question. He doesn't understand. Even I don't understand. I'm trying to understand, right? I'm like, yeah, why is it forbidden? Because my own mind, under the, when suddenly is sort of an insight from beyond my humanity, so to speak, arises in my consciousness, my own mind, an aspect of it, just recoils often, and just is like, no, I'm not having that. No, none of that stuff. No way. And so, okay, a couple features here. So one of the things that happens is once I can structure it in memory, and I'm going to come back to that word, and your experience and the Milky Way and the Earth and this kind of thing. Once I can structure it in memory so that I can hand it off to my sort of conceptual cognition, if you will, so that I can hand it off to conceptual cognition and say, okay, explain this, help me explain this to other human beings. Make a toy that you can show them this insight and they will understand. Once I give it a job, it's totally fine. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not getting evicted. The gods haven't come and just pushed me entirely out of the picture. All right, as long as you keep riding the horse of me, this is all right, right? So then, yeah, this is hilarious and kind of terrifying to experience, because you wonder, like, wait, what the hell is actually, what is my mind? Why does it have these little compartments and stuff? But what I said to my friend was, it's as if in our common waking consciousness, we're in a kind of a prison, sort of a cage.
Yeah.
And any knowledge that has to do with the composition of the bars of the cage, or how we got in there, or what happens to open the door that lets us out, that's what's called forbidden, right? That's the forbidden. That's where the forbidden. What do you think of this? What's your?
Yeah. No, I think you're, as we say an English phrase, you're right on the money there. It's very much the case, and I think this is why people fear even subjects or even the experience of things like hypnosis. This is why people fear anything which alters the conscious awareness, or gets people to, I'm using some fairly cliched phrases here, or gets people to think outside the box in any way whatsoever. It's also sort of borders almost on sort of Gnostic themes as well, the whole demiurgic idea of the fact that forbidden, because the Gnostic ideology was that the demiurgos is actually the one which is controlling this reality, wants us to stay stuck in it, wants us to not question it too much and just keep going along the crystallized forms that it has put in place.
Yes, and a kind of enslavement or occlusion of freedom, intentional occlusion of freedom, right? Yeah,
intentional occlusion of freedom. Yeah, and so the thing is that this med thing, this medicine, is the actual point betwixt, the point between those strictures, the girders of the soul, as they call them. Those actual those places that keep the fabric in place. Now, we know that certain points of what the snake can do is poisonous, and we know that it can also be transmuted into something which has the healing quality. So again, it's all to do with ratio, it's all to do with proportion, it's all to do with how much or how little of something in order to be able to understand where one can actually navigate that, and I use that word as well, navigate, related to the naval, or the navy, the navigation through through this time and space. You know, how do you navigate through time and space? Uh, we're touching on huge topics here
Yes.
that actually really are very huge topics. Actually,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, these are really dangerous things, but dangerous because of their sort of how many layers there are in the strange cone
yeah,
of what we're orbiting.
yeah,
Um,
and of course, if it's presented in a certain way, this to the common perception can also appear like complete, you know,
Nonsense.
madness,
Yeah.
nonsense, or even madness. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
if
I
it's
mean,
not
but
spoken in the right way.
it's true. But one of the things that we moderns mostly lack is an experience of what I would call a manisthai, a mantic
Ah,
prophet who's literally like under the influence of the beyond, or Mnemosyne herself, the
yeah,
mother of the muses. And this
yeah,
is sort of the role that Amon Hillman is flirting with. I mean, I think
sure,
he's a lunatic, I do,
yeah,
but he's also capable of this thing. And the people who are criticizing him, they don't see it at all. They're just attacking him basically on a scholarly level, right? They're
yeah,
like, well, the
yeah,
things
yeah, of
he's
course.
saying can't be true. It's not. I won't go into the details, and we needn't let the conversation veer over.
May
Please.
I
Yes, yeah, yeah, by all means.
speak here as well? Because there's been certain moments in some of your recordings where I've heard you very honestly and very openly um, just toying with the idea of, oh, this word and that word and so on and so on. Now, again, I bring it to your attention, or to everyone's attention, the fact that in a certain way, this is why I brought in the thing of like, does it matter whether it's true or whether it's not true? Of course, the true part, how do we define it? But the not true part, okay, on a scholarly level, yes, okay, you can say this doesn't belong to this root, this word doesn't belong to that because it's from a completely different branch of linguistic roots. However,
Homonymy,
pardon?
homonymy. They sound
Harmonica.
the same,
Exactly.
right?
And so this is what I was going to say. And so think of um, think of the ancient travelers, the troubadours, for example. The troubadours that would take um, songs and poetry and different things from one kingdom to another kingdom, and their duty was to travel from to visit one king and then another king in a different land, and they would travel through different tongues. So they were
These are like
literal
these are like
personifications of Mercury.
they're also like the honeybees, right? They go
Precisely,
flower to flower, right?
precisely,
And then in the hive, the essence of all the flowers is being collected. And
exactly.
so what is it? Okay. There's like there's syllogistic magic here that I want to just highlight. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but this is
No,
important. I
no,
think it's important. Um,
we're rapping, we're rapping, we're
right. As bees
jamming.
are to flowers and honey, right? As
Yeah,
bees are to flowers and honey,
yes,
X is to the different peoples, languages, and then the kings,
yes,
right? To V, right? Whatever the sort of metalog of this honey is,
right,
right? And
right,
it has to do with memory. It has to do with
right.
structuring and unstructuring. We are so fascinated with the structuring things that we generally don't understand that there are magically powerful and unbelievably profound methods of unstructuring.
Right.
Unstructuring isn't merely the disappearance of structure,
No,
right? It's
no,
the
no.
pulsate, like a iterative, slow, iterative dissolution of something that takes, I've never even been able to say this before in my life, that takes away the declarative experience of foveal vision and introduces the changeable, suggestive
Right.
pareidolia of the incomplete image.
Right.
Oh,
Right. And language is always evolving. People forget that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And also, like, also every new idea fertilizes our consciousness. And so every new idea, every new way of hearing things
Yes.
fertilizes our consciousness. But one thing that I often say to people on my courses, when I do my hypnosis courses, especially when I'm speaking about present moment awareness and learning true present moment awareness, if you were a newborn child and you had never heard any words before, and you're hearing your mother and father talking, how is it that you eventually speak those words yourself? You speak those words yourself through the recognition of repetition, of form. But what did they sound like before you understood the form?
Yes, yes. I
Right?
see.
So
Yes.
so so we literally crystallize formlessness into form, which is what everything in this cosmos actually how it came about anyway.
Yeah,
And
right.
so speaking in tongues in the true sense, gobbledygook or whatever you want to call it, is actually the return back to the formlessness, which could, if you want to get a little philosophical about it, could actually be the original form in some way. It's just we
Like
don't.
the language? Or you
Yeah,
mean
you
something
could
different?
say that. You could say it might be a form of language or
I
whatever.
see.
But I'm going off on a tangent now. But
It's
the
okay.
real point I'm trying to make, and this is why barbaric tongue or formless tongue can actually be a perfect way of creating different states of consciousness for a magical mindset, for example, to enter into a new space where the vision state suddenly appears. So, for example, what I was going to say to you is a scholar would say, yes, you can't say that's equivalent to that because we have studied the actual growth of language and the different
Hmm.
branches of the tree. However, not only the newborn baby hears the sounds for the first time,
Yes. They don't care. They don't care about the roots,
they don't
the
care about
triconsonantal roots. They don't care. Yeah, right.
they don't care
It's
about the
not a
roots.
thing. Yeah.
That's right, and neither does. It's like if we go traveling around and we pass through many different countries, we hear people speaking in Spanish. We hear
Yes.
people speaking but we don't know how to speak Spanish. But we hear them speaking Spanish, and then we might go to Italy or we might go to France, and we hear them speaking in Italian. We hear them. Okay, there's some right. My English ears hear some similarities. So because we are pattern recognition devices, because we have to make order out of chaos, we're hardwired to look for the patterns.
Yes.
And so matter, sorry, I'm on a run here, but
No, no.
the pattern is the pater. The matter
Oh,
is the mater.
wow. Okay. Oh my God. Yes.
The
Oh
pattern
God.
and the
Yes.
matter. The
Yes.
pater is the pattern behind all
Oh,
things. The
which
mater is the materialization of all things.
and the mater is also the memory, and the pattern is the patter, the
Yeah,
speaking,
yeah,
and how it structures.
yeah.
Right. It's this eros, right? It's this active eros between these two. I remember when I was little, my mom I was a bit hyper lexical as a kid. I had a natural affinity for English
Right,
and reading and stuff. Is this
right.
familiar to you as well? Did you read a lot when you were a kid, or?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Well, especially when I reached my late teens, I just went crazy reading just all the time, you know. But as a child, as a young child, I read a lot. Yes.
Yeah, there's an apocryphal story where my kindergarten teacher calls my mom in and tells her that I have a learning disability because I'm not paying attention during reading. My mom is like, "Well, what are you reading?" And she
Yes.
holds up like Fun with Dick and Jane. It's like, you know, Darren's reading 2001: A Space Odyssey at home. You're like, what? You sure Darren has a learning to, you know, like, anyway. Um, okay, so my mom, I remember one day, I was probably like four or something, three or four. And she said, she sort of sang to me, Y-O-U spells you. And I was like, that can't be right. Why? The question why? Oh, me? Why oh me spells you? She's messing with me. That can't be how they do spelling, right? And I'm hearing the homonymy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
naturally noticing these things, which, let's be clear, psychotics and schizophrenics also notice this,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
there is madness and prodigy are
Yeah.
feathers on the same wing, right? I
Yeah.
usually would say
Yeah.
wings on the same bird, but they're feathers on
Yeah.
the same wing. And I remember going to school and asking the teacher, maybe I was in first grade or something, I was like, so are you telling me there's no relationship whatsoever between SEA, the ocean, and SEE, seeing? Because there's salt water in my eye, right? I know the water in my eye is salty, is what I'm thinking, right? It must be that I see because of the sea, right? We come from the sea. I'm having these complex pattern making
Yeah.
reveries, is what I would
Yeah.
call them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, no, there's absolutely no relationship between it. It's completely accidental. It can't be true. And then, of course, this comes back to what is meant by truth. You know, which kind of true?
Right. Okay. I think the thing is we obviously we are both speaking about and dealing with areas where obviously it's a double-edged sword. You know, it's a
Yes.
double-edged sword because the side there is a side to it where if unchecked and untrammeled, it can spin off into complete meaningless chaos and complete making equivalences where equivalences don't have any meaningful relation.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear about the three of the dangers there, right? You have
Yeah,
delusion, paranoia, and megalomania,
yeah, yeah.
right?
You
Those are the
can't
three primary spikes on that thorny crown, so
exactly,
to speak.
exactly. Because once again, you know, I've seen plenty of examples of, and I'm sure you have yourself as well, plenty of examples of individuals who've gone down these similar types of paths and have ended up, you know, spinning off into outer space altogether.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
it's a
certainly.
fairly common thing when people begin to work this way. However, what is interesting is the fact that when I say, you know, mater and pater, you know, mater and pater, the matter and the pattern. Again, this is one of those things where an academic could argue, well, there is no relationship between those two.
Yeah, yeah.
However, the point is, and I think this is the important thing, the point is, how does that how does that enable us to, in a meaningful way, back to the medicine again, back to the healing, how does that in a meaningful way cause us to feel enlivened and once again at peace with our place in the universe, our place in the world, and our relationship to it? Rather than it being a painful thing, how does this become a life affirming and joyful relationship to finding these things? Because back to medicine again, illness, in my opinion, I speak for myself here, illness, in my opinion, is actually the result of fragmentation, creating a state where we become fragmented and disconnected. And you see this in all the ancient myths, in all the ancient technologies such as shamanism and the rest of it, the dismembered self, the Osirian self, you know, Osiris in ancient Egypt, the dismembered one, Isis, his wife, his divine wife, puts him back together again. Humpty Dumpty, you know, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. It's that whole thing of what is it that causes us, that allows us to form a meaningful and joyful and life-affirming reconnection so that we begin to sense an internal trajectory towards we have an even if we can't answer the questions now in this life, which, and this partly this is why I believe in this is not the only life, Darren. It's like I believe you, many of us, consciously even, have been here many times before. That's another subject, another whole thing.
Familiar to me as well, though, and I'm not even sure that me is one thing.
No,
right? Like in a way, I can imagine at least that me is a constellation of past beings, right? With a sort of much like a solar system, like with the sun in the middle, and I think I'm the sun, right? And I think like no, it's me. Yeah, I'm the important thing here because I'm the nucleus, right, or something.
Right.
And there's many different ways to imagine it that are useful and brilliant and helpful. But I don't want to lose the thread. Okay, so there's so many different topics here. We agree though fundamentally that it's wildly unlikely that we come out of nothing into I'm a Darren and then I, walk through my life and then I'm a nothing again. That's just very unlikely. I don't think there's any feature of nature that we can understand that works that way. Right? It just doesn't.
Right.
It's not one thing like that. The only thing kind of like that is language. Right? Language can be a little bit like that, a little bit. But even that, you have the entire history of a language, right? And then you have speakers and like I speak a language, so that history I must inherit it in order to be able to speak. But all right, so I want to focus on illness as fragmentation.
Yes.
A dissolution-like process.
Yes.
Into dreaming, which is the between of maybe conception, birth, life, sleep, dreaming, death, right? All these things are on this continuum. We go down into the between or up into the between or both, right? We go above our life and below our life. At the same time, we're in the liminal, what we might think of the between space, the liminal space, where the foundations become blurry and start to liquefy. And another amazing example or metaphor for this is obviously the chrysalis, right?
Yes.
The physical thing literally liquefies, and then it forms this jewel-like, basically it's a casket, right?
Yeah.
It's a sarcophagus, right? And then out of the sarcophagus explodes this impossible thing that feeds on the nectar of the flowers, and so and this is I don't really know if what Amon's talking about, I think it's relevant, but it never occurred to me before I heard him say it, not one time. I knew there was an association between death and wisdom, but it never once occurred to me that there might have been wisdom traditions where they literally said like, okay, we're gonna kill you, you're gonna die, right? And we're going to give you these substances. They're going to die. We're going to structure this process from before we give you the substances into terror, absolute terror, like mind-wrecking, shivering. I tell all my sins, right? Because I'm terrified out of my mind. And that's not necessarily true that that's a phase in this, but it's possible in the way he discusses it. And then being taken into like the cave of the Sibyl. You die, you awaken, they resurrect you, they give you the antidote, they bring you back to life. You've now seen the other side directly firsthand, like the people that we might hear near-death narratives from. And then you have to find your way out of the cave through a sequence of sort of visual allegories or something like this. Now, I'm half making up some of this, but nothing like this ever occurred to me before. I knew there's an association between death and knowledge. The 13th Sephirah in Kabbalah is Dath, which at least has this resonance and is associated with death, right?
Right, right.
And then there's, you know, the snake at the tree, which is, this is a question that I actually took up with the non-human intelligence. Like, what do you want to know? I said, I want to know about that thing. They're like, wait, what? No, I said, you could have anything. I'm like, yeah, I want to know about that thing where the accident happened and something got broken in our people. And then now we're always in this trouble over generations of generations. Is it? And they taught me all kinds of amazing things about that. And basically what it came down to is that the loss of contact with divine intelligences resulted in the prominence of representational cognition. And that stuff is super vulnerable to capture by sort of these processes, right? They're not like demons or daimons, but they act very malignantly, and their primary concern is domination, reproduction, and contagion, right? Just like spread an idea that captures the humans and their behavior. So they do this, but they're not beings. They're just, it's a side effect of a structural problem when representational cognition can't be reconnected with its origins. And so it's sort of spun off as a broken satellite, like a dead inside satellite. It never occurred to me that, for example, maybe the snake actually just straight up killed Eve and then like resurrected her and then showed her how to do this. And she did this to Adam. And then there was a big, like that, it's just a mind-blowing idea. And once again, I'm not trying to say it's true or it's not true. I don't care if it's true or it's not true. You see what I mean? It's so profound.
Yeah, sure.
And when we hypnotize someone, in a sense, their ego undergoes a dissolution that's safe. Yeah. And we don't have to terrify them or, you know, give them drugs or anything, right? I remember a time when someone I'd hired came to my house, and he'd clearly been in an accident on his way to my house. He was in bad pain. This is a really tough young man, right? Been in prison, like lots of fights. If he's showing the pain, he's in a lot of pain. And we talked a little bit, and I just said, look, I can tell you're in a lot of pain. How would you feel about that just going away? He's like, dude, I don't have time. And I'm like, do you have 2 minutes? It's like, yeah. And I sat him down, I drew him into trance, and I essentially just erased the pain. And he was so excited and freaked out because he's like, how did you do this? You know, and I said, look, just check with me over the next few days. If the pain comes back, call me, whatever. And it was really pretty mind-blowing to me. How can this even be true? It doesn't make any sense to regular thought that something like this is possible. I can say a few words to someone over, I don't know, a minute and a half, and the pain is, they don't feel it anymore. They're free of the pain. What is this? This can't be right. Yeah, like, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, whatever you got.
Well, you've sort of reminded me of the fact that we're going back to the movements and the awareness and the movements and the changing of awareness, because there's two major. I mean, the form of hypnosis that we ordinarily think of these days is verbal suggestion. So we've been talking a lot about language. We've been talking a lot about how thoughts, how words can actually evoke certain types of dreams or images in the mind through association, sometimes even through the phonetic equivalence, like you say, can actually create an image associated with that phonetic equivalence, you know? And that can be used in hypnosis. And in actual fact, it's been successfully used in hypnosis as a technique by some of the most famous hypnotists. But there's another form of hypnosis as well, which is nonverbal. And of course, the arts of magnetism and mesmerism deal more with the nonverbal side. You know, and there was a very famous hypnotist in the modern age, who I'm pretty sure you are very well aware of, Milton Erickson, you know, very famous American hypnotist. And the thing that's great about Milton Erickson is the fact that a lot of his students in the modern day are poring over tomes of his original work, trying to find the secrets in the words he spoke. But when you see even a video of Milton Erickson, you actually see obviously what's going on. It wasn't the words he spoke, they were just a part of the equation. It was actually his whole stance, his energy, his self-awareness, his movements, and how completely present to himself he was while he was doing them.
It's difficult not to begin to fall into trance just while listening and watching you, because you're doing what you're saying right now, obviously.
Right.
And you may not be, you know, turning up the volume on it intentionally, but it's blatantly obvious that you're doing what you're talking about, which again is
It
a kind of
becomes natural.
It does, yes, it does. But it's also really strange because we so rarely encounter something like this, where what is being spoken of is being enacted while it's being, and so the enaction is real and visceral and somatic and emotional and psychological, and the words are in line with a fundamental thing that's happening. It's
Right.
so uncommon for us to have this experience. Please continue.
Yeah. And so, as I'm saying, it's very much to do with the awareness of yourself in the conditions of space and time.
Mm.
So here you are making a measure of your existence in space and time. If you're in that state, someone suddenly throws a ball across the room, you catch it in your hand. I mean, how is it that people play golf, for example, and hit a tiny little edge of a ball and get the trajectory just right? How many fractions of measurement are inside that thing? And so this is where we go back in. This is where we go into the wisdom tradition of you spoke about the Kabbalah, but the true Kabbalah, on the continent at least, over in Europe, true Kabbalah has always been understood as the Kabbalah phonetique.
Oh, okay.
It's what's spoken and it's what's heard, not what's written or defined. And it's called le Kabbalah phonetique, le langue verte, the green tongue, the living tongue, the verdant tongue, verdant, verdant. So poetry and poesis comes from this use of language and words using the Kabbalah phonetique, the phonetic Kabbalah. I mean, Kabbalah, from its very meaning, means the received tradition. The received tradition from mouth to ear. From mouth to ear.
Yeah, orally transmitted long before there was writing, and even after there was writing, there's a layer beyond all the book stuff where from me to you. This is why you and I aren't having a written conversation. Like, I'm not sending you questions and you're typing the answers, right? And also, you know, my own development, my own sort of romance with language, letters, spelling, phonetics. As a poet, eventually what started happening was very, very strange things, like things that there's no precedent in ordinary thought or knowledge. Writing things and then having them happen, writing poems, right? Now, of course, there's a problem there, and this problem borders on when we talk about things like synchronicity.
Right, right.
And again, it's similar with what we might call, God, there's so many concepts here. So when I say the word magic, I can mean different things. But if I mean the true, old, trustworthy, transcendent skillfulness, if I mean something like this, then you can have, like, I began to realize that bibliomancy was a real thing. You can open up a book and you can read randomly. You can get 7 books in front of you, open them all up and switch between them, and you can begin to see something that's impossible for you to see if you're not
Right.
playing this kind of a game. And okay, so where am I going here?
It breaks through the web again. It's just
It
you
does.
getting through. You're getting it's that medium, that media stuff.
But it's also you're rising up to where this, I'm going to use the word eros, but the intimacy, the active, mutually adoring, magical intimacy between memory and possibility, origin, and in structuring, right? All of these things are they become coherently musical. Music as in insight, right? The insight of memory.
Right.
So there's all these features of language that are mostly completely unknown to moderns. And so when you say like the verdant tongue, I know what you're talking about, I think. I mean, not in the same sense that you have in your mind. I'm losing my train of thought because there's so many things involved here. To transmit orally in song is really profound. And some time ago, because I got very lucky, I underwent an experience where something was transferred to me in an indigenous tradition. And I had to hear the song of the transfer. And I had to be sort of remade. And this is a form of, transfer, these actually do link up kind of, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to hear the song and then I had to learn the song. And it was a very, very difficult thing to learn because it's not like Western music at all. It's just sort of there's all these tones, there's vibrato, and there's no syllables really. I mean, kind of. And so obviously what's happening there is structured linguistic consciousness is liquefying, and it's just starting to like flow and spin, and then it reforms slowly afterwards. And in that reforming, this reminds me of, the caterpillar into the chrysalis, the healing, which is also a kind of death, right? It's at least a death of the previously fragmented state. At least that is dying into this liquescence, right? This enchanted, liquescent, shining thing, and then it's restructuring with the fragmentation somehow subtracted.
Right.
Please,
Yes.
whatever. Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Whatever you
Yeah.
have.
I mean, this is what again. We were talking about wisdom traditions. I mean, everything you described before was obviously was very clearly what they were doing in Eleusis in ancient Greek, in ancient Greece, Eleusis, as the Greeks pronounce it, and also what you've just described a moment ago was basically the process of which was again very well known inside the wisdom traditions of, say, the alchemistic point of view, because you have the dissolution, the solve, and then the reformation, which is the coagula.
Coagula, yeah.
So
Right.
you have these literally
Solve
what we're
et
talking
coagula.
about is the
Yeah.
solve coagula. That's what we're talking about here.
Oh.
And so, but anything to be and talking about NLP and hypnosis and things like that, I remember one really useful quote that has always stuck with me that I remember Bandler saying. In hypnosis and in NLP, you're only doing only ever doing one of two things. You're either pulling things apart or bringing things back together. So you're either moving the person away from what they don't want, or you're bringing them closer to what they want, or a bit of both, like a lemboscan. You're actually dissolving their fixations or crystallization around a particular psychological issue. So dissolving it, breaking it apart, making it looser, so they're no longer seeing it in such a tight jacket kind of way anymore. You free them, you give them space to breathe, space to be themselves again, space to find that thing that they feel as their valuable self again. And once they begin to glimpse that, you draw their motivation towards that to be more present in their life. So it's always there. So it becomes more and more a living reality rather than the things they don't want. So it's all about that, reformulating the trajectory away from what you don't want towards what you do want, away from what you don't want to be towards what you want to be, which is putting it in very simple terms. Solving coagulation.
It's ironic that in our common human experience, we find ourselves fascinated, bound, and trapped by pain and fear and history. And these can become, I was doing some counseling with a couple, and one of the couple was concerned that the other one might be cheating. And I said, I sort of looked into the situation and I said, I really don't think your partner's cheating. What's going on is your partner is in love with their historical pain.
Right.
So it's as if they're cheating, but they're not kissing someone else. They're having a romantic relationship with agony, with historical agony, with fear, with an iterative cycle that has happened and been, gone again and again. And, just as someone who tries to understand my own trouble in my own life, the constancy of incredibly ironic, I thought something was done to me, but when I go back and sort of unwrap the crime scene, so to speak, it always starts with my thumbprint. It's Darren's, fingerprint right there at the beginning that I overlook and think like, oh no, it was something that was done to me, or it happened to me, or something like this. So there's this incredible irony, and particularly today when we hear people talking about trauma work and stuff. No, I want to be careful because I want to be gentle with myself and with other people, and not just say, look, you're sticking the knife in yourself or whatever. That's a very crude thing to say. That's not what I mean. But somehow there is this, we have entranced ourselves over the history of our lives, many of us, and we're spiraling along this very familiar path that we're in love with, and we're kind of frightened. We don't know anything. Nothing else is as familiar as that. Nothing else. We're not intimate with anything more than we're intimate with that. And so in a beautiful situation, someone who is skillful and has awareness can come and sort of dissolve that iterative cycle briefly. And so now we feel the freedom. And after we get a good sort of the flavor of that freedom in our energy, in our body, in our senses, then we can perhaps let go and begin transferring our attention toward something beautiful, fulfilling, alive.
Yes. I mean, something that I often say to people is, and I know this is certainly true from my own experience, is we don't really know truly what we want until we really know what we don't want. So and you only know what you don't want by actually experiencing what you don't want. And by experiencing what you really don't want, you really become to understand the real depth of what you really do want. And as a result of that, it's like an arrow pointing towards a target. You become more and more sharply defined towards where it is you're truly going.
Mm.
And so where we are really going is what it's like a string pulling from inside us. We can't help but go where we truly in our heart want to go.
That's very powerful. Yeah, there's so many things that I'm beginning to see that I've not been able to be conscious, to form in consciousness before. But I want to come back, I want to circle back because there's some unanswered early stuff here. So you came back from your trip, you're in London, you're torn open, you're in
Yes.
despair, you're dreaming,
Yes.
the woman's leading you down the river, which by the way is pretty, it reminds me of a snake, right? And the woman
Yes.
is mediating, you know, you're
Yeah.
actually inside the living water snake, right? And every time you awaken, you're filled with energy and,
Yeah.
but you're also like your motivation is crashed and you don't want to get out of bed. You're starting to want to get out of bed.
No. Now I'm having these dreams. Every
Okay.
time I had a dream, I would wake up with renewed energy and I would feel a complete reinvigorated sense of purpose. And yeah, this is what would arise out of that period of time where I didn't want to get out of bed.
Mm.
Was having the dream of getting in the boat and drifting down the rivers. Now, there are many more things I could say about this. Maybe not on this occasion, maybe some other time. I don't know.
We're gonna have
But
more than one of these as long as
but
you're willing. Yeah.
oh, very much willing.
Yeah, me too.
These basically this place became an actual reality.
You found it?
I actually found the hill and I
Oh
found
yeah.
the river. I
Yeah.
found the river, I found the hill, I found everything.
Yeah. Yeah,
Years
this is where
later,
the problem, this is where the
years
real
later.
problem arises, right? Like my friend who met these people in dreaming and they exchanged contact information and then they met, you know,
Wow.
and began
Wow.
to work magically together, right? So what is, you know, we have this idea that dreaming is just this sort of fantasy thing. No, I'm not sure that, I don't think so.
So
There's,
what about the dream time? Obviously, the Aboriginal sense of dream time, because this was going through my mind earlier while you were speaking, because you have the walking, which is a really important part of the Aboriginal ideology, isn't it? It's the
the
walking with
walkabout, yeah.
the charingas and the walkabout, and you have your charinga stone and you have all of your marks on your charinga. This is actually the thing that they enter into the dream time
Mm-hmm.
through the walk,
Mm-hmm.
and this is something that became sort of that became a bit of an idea, you know, a bit of a thought in my mind. It's like doing that walk. Not only did I, in the English sense, by walking from west to east, I literally cut through all of the geomagnetic energy lines that run through England this way.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that I started to become aware of many years later, and I'm just wondering how much of a connection that has
Yeah,
to.
I mean, but also you're walking from the future to the past. In the West is tomorrow, right? And the
Oh
East
yes,
is before,
and
right?
the east is
So
before,
you're
right?
going, you know, you're literally
Yeah,
going
and that's
back.
interesting. That's interesting because before I went, I actually had a quandary about that. Which way shall I walk? Shall I go from the west to the east, or shall I walk from the east to the west? And I thought about it, and I was thinking, well, if I'm walking from the east to the west, I'm going to have the sun on my back, you know, for most of the day. But if I'm walking from the other way, I'll be walking into the sun.
So, yeah, so many questions here. First, what was going on in you that led you to do the walk? And was it
I've
a kind
always,
of, one more thing, was it a kind of pilgrimage? Go ahead.
I never really consciously understood it at that time as being a pilgrimage, but then, you know, in all the years that have come subsequently to that experience, I've fully understood the whole concept and meaning of pilgrimage.
Okay, yeah.
And there
So
were so many
what,
things
yeah,
that happened then.
I
Yeah.
believe you. Yeah, so what motivated you? I didn't mean to interrupt some of the things that happened.
What motivated me was the beauty of you know, connecting back to the land, connecting back to the landscape, the beauty of living in that landscape and being and moving within it, with the movement of the sun and the moon and the stars, and me moving through the landscape, witnessing all of these beautiful things. Because I've always loved just beautiful places with a passion.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we are Sylvan. You were talking about that verdant. And
Yes,
it was only last week that somebody, I was making a joke about Pennsylvania being a place where they make a lot of pencils. And she was like, no, no, that's about the forest. It's about Sylvania, the
right.
Sylvan, glade. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, right. Yes. Um, okay. So how do you get from the dream to interest in, and which came first, mesmerism or hypnosis?
Right. So I started, first of all, studying NLP.
Ah,
And from NLP, I started to study hypnotism, because as I went through the NLP, I was thinking, well, they've garnered these materials, they've gathered all of this stuff from earlier hypnosis and hypnotic techniques.
hmm.
So then I started to become more interested in things like Milton Erickson and more traditional hypnosis. But I'd already had, from my experience of going to sacred sites, I'd already had certain experiences of, and also the walk itself, certain places where you would walk into a place and you would feel your, a connection to the energetic flow that was running through the land, or from a tree, or from a stone in one of the stone circles, or something like this. And I would notice how when these feelings arose, it wasn't just a feeling, it wasn't just a visceral feeling. It would literally affect your the conscious awareness of how you're interacting with the world around you, because you're not just feeling the feeling. Your perception starts to become altered as well. Like colors become brighter, sounds become more loud, or just like vibrational forms that lose their names or lose their labels.
Mhm.
And so you start to become, well, I'm speaking for myself here, start to become immersed in a sea of energy, which actually has the possibility of being somehow modified. So it's not just like you're receiving information, and because this pen is a pen, we call it a pen, it's only a pen. It's more, this pen exists within my conscious awareness, within my perception, and it's it's subject to the solve coagula in the same way as all the other forms we're talking about.
Let me pause you there to see if I'm understanding something. Uh, and maybe I'm not, but it sounds like you're saying
Well, let's
something that,
try. Let's try.
yeah, it sounds like you're saying something that resembles um, features of experience that we would normally cognize representationally, i.e.,
Yeah,
this is a pen.
yeah.
They are experienced, but not representationally. Now they are like forms or forces, or
Yes,
uh,
yes.
they are they are structuring awareness rather than awareness putting an overlay on them. This is a bird, this is a blue jay's call.
Well, it happens both ways.
Mm,
It happens both ways. I think, to be honest with you, I think it's happening both ways all the time.
I do
Like,
too.
we have things outside of us,
So to speak.
so to speak, or so we are led to believe.
No, our standard waking consciousness is that. But I mean, what the hell is going on with things outside you when you're dreaming?
Well, exactly.
Right? Like, what does outside mean?
Well, yes, and if you see the sun, if you're sitting on a beach and you're feeling the sun hitting your skin and you're feeling the heat and you're getting a tan in a dream, I don't know if you've ever had a dream like that where the sun's been hitting you in a dream and you've seen the sun and you feel the sun, but you're dreaming. And and so where
I mean,
is
this
the
is very
sun?
ironic. What you're saying here is extremely ironic. But I'm listening. Keep going, please.
Where is the sun?
Yes. No, this is something. I'm sorry. This is something I ask people commonly. I will, I'll ask their permission because it's nice to have consent, right? That
Of
matters.
course. Yeah.
And I'll say, like, I want to ask you some questions about your dreaming and what I want you to. And by the way, if anyone's listening to this later, go ahead and pretend we're asking you this question. I want to ask you some questions about your dreaming. And they'll be like, okay. And I'll say, I want you only to answer yes if you have an actual memory, not if you think it happened, right? Not if you think like, yeah, that probably happened to me. I don't want to hear yes then. But if you have an actual memory of this, then say yes. And they'll be like, okay. And I'll say, like, have you ever seen the sun in a dream? And they'll answer. And most people say no. And then I'll ask them, have you ever seen the moon? And they'll answer. And then I'll ask them, have you ever seen like an electric light source, like a lamp? Or have you ever seen a burning candle? And they'll answer. And then I'll ask the question that I think is much trippier, but they don't know why I'm asking. So I'll say, like, have you ever tried to turn on a light switch in a dream? And they'll be like, and if they say yes, almost invariably, I'd be like, yeah, and the weirdest thing, and then they just go into whatever happened. So I have no idea what your answers to these questions are. I have seen the sun. I have seen the moon. I don't remember the sun shining on my skin in the way that you say. Attempts to turn on light switches tend to produce hypnopompic phenomena, right? Which are very strange, usually, and sometimes involve sleep paralysis or other. And this is again where we get into there's so much to go into here because there's that between space, there's the twilight space at the beginning of the sleep cycle, and there may be some, along the curve of it, but then there's that other special twilight space at the end of it. And they tend to have different character, right? The hypnagogic, which I think is the beginning, if I have that right, and the hypnopompic, which is the end.
Yeah.
And these things are very fascinating to me. But then when after I've asked the questions, and I'll ask you this question, because I can't wait to hear your answer. What do you think illuminates your dreams? Because it sure isn't light. It ain't light that's illuminating your dreams. I mean, it ain't light like this kind.
Well, this leads me on. I can't help but answer the question with a question.
By all
And the
means.
question is, what is light anyway?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so of the great questions that we can chase, and let me be clear, I have a harem. I'm not satisfied with one wife in this domain. I have a harem, okay?
Right.
And there's like, what is light? What is time?
Yep.
Why are there beings?
Yep.
What is time space?
Yep.
Why are there living worlds? What are organisms?
Right.
These, are some of my most beloved.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for an answer to these questions.
Oh no, we're not.
That would be a divorce, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want an answer. I want kisses and lovemaking and
Absolutely, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. We're on the same page, absolutely, in that spirit. Because this is what I was saying to you before. It's like we don't have to answer these questions.
Well, we can. Our relationship with them expands and becomes more beautiful as we proceed without it being demarcated and without it being explicitly declared, oh, it is this.
Yeah, what I meant to say was we don't have to definitively answer these questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real
We
problem
just
in
don't.
consciousness with declaration.
Yeah,
Explicit things is like consciousness collapses into, I don't know what, a knife, a weapon,
yeah.
like something not trustworthy most of the time. There might be a few purposes over on the side for which that's useful. Okay, so back to NLP, and you're like, let's go back before that because this is coming out of hypnosis. Obviously, the next thing is, okay, this is coming. Hypnosis is coming out of mesmerism. I'm guessing, but no, tell
Oh,
the
no,
story.
no, no,
No,
no.
oh, okay.
So NLP took me back to hypnosis. Hypnosis took me back to mesmerism. But mesmerism took me right back to what I was already intuitively and naturally being in touch with in the first place. That led me to want to begin to even start to study hypnosis. So I knew there was a connection between the alteration of consciousness and changes that can occur as a result of how you have this crossflow, the interaction between things which you perceive and things which you interact with, and how they can both form a dance with each other and how they can modify each other. Things from the outside obviously modify us on the inside, to use that convenient metaphor, and things from the inside actually have an impact and effect upon the external world as well.
So there's an implication here that I just want to highlight before you
Sure.
continue, which is the opposite of passive synchronicity.
Right,
It's
right, right.
active
Active synchronicity.
synchro.
Yeah.
I don't have the rest of the word. It's like active synchronation, synchronation,
Synchronization, nice word.
something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this, right?
Right,
I'm
right. So
struggling.
it's a bit like deliberately plucking a string to cause a resonance, a harmonic resonance through
Yes, yes,
time and space.
yes, yes. And obviously, vocal intonation has this natural quality. We're us moderns aren't very familiar with it. Hypnotists are, singers
Yeah,
are,
yeah.
poets can be,
Shamans are as well. Yes.
orators, yeah, too.
Orators in general. Yes.
Okay, so the mesmerism brings you back to, and what I heard when you were describing this was on the walk, I discovered a sort of the river of myself
Yes.
that was this thing for which there is no word, yet it's mine, and I sense it and I can taste it and it's real. And then I come back to the city and it's all broken and I'm in despair. And then the dreaming sort of reforges this golden, silvery starlight, you know, and then it leads you into NLP and hypnosis and mesmerism, which leads you back into what I can only say is like a soul path or something like this.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the Milky Way is understood in this fashion by many
Yeah.
indigenous peoples. They're like, that's a route. That's a route, a living route, right? Or route, as maybe it's pronounced
Yeah.
in British English.
Root. Root.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, a
Root.
route, a route.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm with you. So it leads you back. The mesmerism brings you back.
Yes. Yes. And years later, the particular stretch of the walk where I experienced this connectivity with the Milky Way and the Earth, and me as the medium between, myself as my own body as the medium between the Earth and the heavens.
Yes.
This part of the walk where this happened was a part of the walk which is 40-mile expanse, crossing over um, moorland. And this particular path going across the moorland is a really ancient prehistoric path, which is known as the Lyke Wake Walk. Lyke, as in Lyke, which is an old ancient English word meaning that which is like to yourself. So like and alike, to be alike to something, like your twin or your likeness. The like, L-Y-K-E. And then the second name of the walk was the like wake walk, meaning wake as in like an Irish wake or a funeral where you're actually having the wake performed. So it is literally the walk of your double, of your like, of your dead self walking, and the path follows the Milky Way, literally follows the Milky Way. I only discovered this about 12 or 13 years later. So there was a connection.
One of the things I heard, one of the things that was suggested to me about the story that you've told is that when you went on this walk, it was your whole life. It was your whole life from like beginning to like conception to death. And this walk was outside your life, above your life, or within your life, right? And you're doing this walk. And then after that, what's happening is the resonance of the different parts of the walk is flowing into and informing your regular temporalized life path. Something like this? Am I close?
I very much concur with your interpretation because it's like the old principle of, you know, the greater is as to the smaller as the smaller is to the greater. It's the as above so below. It's it's this literally like what you're saying is something along those lines, that within this act, within this action, was a map of my whole life.
A weird kind of map, like a living map, not like the map in the territory, and not like that.
Right.
No, a living
Right.
map.
Yeah. Almost like a divinatory map as well in that sense.
Oracular. Yeah,
oracular. Yes.
Yeah. That's so incredible. There's something. Okay, so there's another feature here along this route, this path, which is that as you proceed, okay, you come back from the walk and you begin, your life afterwards, and you're living, and doesn't have to be in a linear line, right? But it's natural for us to think this way. But there's something strange happening, which is as you're proceeding in your life post-walk, features of the walk are anamnoetically spiraling back and making so it's like this spiraling, this anamnesis, right? The unforgetting. An unforgetting is this spiraling pulse as you proceed in your post-walk life. Something like this is a sense that I'm getting.
And walking to the sun. Yes. Walking toward the sun.
And
because I couldn't help but notice after doing this and through the rest of my life how everything within the world echoes that principle, whether they are consciously aware of the fact or not. It's like a flower. A flower is obviously it's a seed. It's under the earth. It comes up through the earth, and then it rises up and opens its head, and it even follows the thing. But when it was a seed, it already knew, well, obviously in some way it already knew that its duty was to reach back to where it came from.
It's destiny.
It's destiny.
Yeah,
and the thing is all of everything here on the earth, including the earth itself, no wonder in ancient times they looked at the sun and said, this is Ra, this is God,
It absolutely blows my mind the degree to which moderns are confused, because I was talking with an extremely intelligent gentleman yesterday, and I asked him some questions about the sun, and it was very clear that he has no idea what I'm not trying to denigrate my friend. What I'm
No,
trying to
no,
say
no,
is,
no.
there is nothing near us as primordial as that.
No.
That thing has absolute precedence. It comes before all other things. If the
Yep.
sun were to blink out, the entire history of human thought, feeling, life, spirit, like the whole thing would just go like, boop, it's gone. So
Yep.
it must be that everything around here is literally like an organ of the sun's. It's the it's like a side effect of the fact of what the sun is being and doing, right? So minds, dreams, like souls, all these things, these are like a side effect of what this, we don't have a word for. It's more than a god. It's more than a god. And we think, oh, it's like a nuclear explosion in space time. Right? It's
Oh
so
no, no.
backwards.
Everything we're saying, everything we're thinking,
Yeah.
everything we're perceiving
The
is it.
the possibility of anything at all
Yeah.
has to begin with, at least around here, with that
Yeah.
more than a being, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it's not. I think we're confused when we think the ancients thought of the sun as a god, because there wouldn't even be gods. There's no. You won't have ideas. You won't have arguments. There won't be anything at all unless that organizes it. And of course, the planets, the other stars, the moon, these are also primordial, but the sun, it's the ultimate local progenitor of stuffness, of possibility. Yeah. So I have incredible reverence for the sun. And also, I remember when a very beloved pet was dying. This was a Ghanan flower mantis. It's a little creature from Ghana. Right? It was my teacher for a long time. And I adored this creature. And they only live about 6 months, so they're gonna die. And she was dying, and I had her on a flower in my hand, and I was crying. I was just inconsolable. And she said in my mind, like, "Why are you crying? This is the most glorious moment of my existence. I am returning to the sun." I was just like, really? And she was like, yeah, don't worry. I know you're sad. Well, we'll miss each other, but I'm going to the sun, and we will go there together. Part of you will go with me, is sort of what was being implied, right? We will
Right.
go together.
Right.
So yeah, these things make sense to me.
Hmm.
The sun. Yeah, I remember when I was a little kid, I asked him what the sun was, and he said, it's like a big explosion in space. And it makes this radiation stuff. And I was like, what's radiation? It's like, well, you have to be careful. It can mess you up. It can make you sick. And it's like, and I wonder what it would be like if, first of all, I was terrified. What my dad said led to the idea of nuclear weapons and this kind of thing, right? It was just terrifying. And nothing, really almost nothing about the spirit or,
Hmm.
wisdom or insight about the sun. Sorry, it was a bit of a tangent. So you're
No, I
facing the
think it's
sun and you're walking toward the sun. And what you're saying is, this is sort of what our life path is. We come from the sun in a sense, we are incarnate. We walk then toward the sun, not realizing that, and hilariously you hear things in death like, there was this very bright light at the end of a tunnel, right? Like, wait, what are they?
well,
I'm
well,
not
yeah.
saying that is the sun, by the way, but
No, no, but just right. So we see this thing, the sun, yeah.
Mhm.
But even the sun is, you might say, we could consider the sun to be just a metaphor.
Oh, okay, I would say it differently. I would call it a hypostasis.
A hypostasis,
A
yes.
lesser stasis of something
Beyond
beyond
it,
it, right?
yes.
That is so profound that compared to that, even the sun is kind of, you know,
Yeah, yeah, precisely.
yeah, yeah.
That's the spirit of what I was
Yes,
attempting
yes, a
to say by
hypostasis,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, a hypostasis is a good way of
I
putting
think
it.
time
So
space is a hypostasis of something.
yes,
Usually I think this way. There are other ways of
yes,
thinking, but and the
yes.
earth is a hypostasis, and a body is a hypostasis of something.
Precisely, precisely, precisely. Yes, yes. This is exactly as I understand it as well. These are the conclusions I've reached myself as well. Yes, yes. So what I'm saying is by working with things like trance states, by working with things like hypnosis, it offers people the opportunity, and the reason why we have therapeutic work and to be able to do therapeutic work is because it allows one to enter into that liminal space where like I say, the crystallizations can become more fluid and then can reform into a shape closer to the heart's desire.
Mhm.
So that's why we can let go of things and bring it closer to the heart's desire, or at least be prepared to do so. Because nobody can really do that work unless in themselves they reach that place. So you might say the skill of a good therapeutic is to bring it out of that person, that readiness to let go of the things that no longer serve them. And I think that this is what's important is recognizing, each of us to recognize, and I say this generally for the whole world, for everybody, for us to all recognize what no longer serves our true trajectory, our true purpose, our true, you know.
So you're saying that the therapist or the therapeutic, I think is the word you
Yeah.
used.
I like to use the word therapeutic. Yeah. Yeah.
They, in a sense, they potentiate the situation
Yeah.
so that the grasping onto the pain and the illness
Yes.
relaxes naturally and opens
Yes.
up. And so
Yeah.
that it's as if they are it's as if they are catalyzing a transformation almost in something like the electromagnetic
Yes. 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 Yes.
character of, yeah, something resembling that. It's a transformation of how the charges are deployed, how charge is deployed, or at least this is what is in my mind.
Right. Right. So, for example, I'll use another way of explaining things, another metaphor.
Mm.
It's like we can take a grain of salt, or or some sugar, and we can and the sugar. If this grain of salt or this piece of sugar, this grain, one single crystal, if that was a metaphor for the individuality, like I'm stuck with this, and even though I don't like it, I want to be this grain. I want to stay this shape. You know, I know that there are a few other shapes I can be and I could reform myself into, but I like this shape. It's like, yeah, but what if you sort of, but if it, when you say you want to stay this shape, how many things are causing you pain being this shape? And it's like, well, yeah, I suffer all this pain, but I am this shape, right? Oh, yeah, but if we just sort of put a little bit of moisture on you and, sort of breathe on you, you might start to just lose that shape slightly. How about trying on? Are you willing to try on this new shape, perhaps? Like just give it a go? And so you get the individual used to the idea of maybe trying out this new shape, like a
Yeah,
kid that
also,
doesn't want to get rid of their safety blanket. It's like, well, try
right,
on this new jumper. It's like different color to what you normally wear, but it might work. You might
right.
actually like it.
Yeah, also there's a few simple features of this that aren't scary. And the first
Mm,
one is you can when we're going to go to a different thing for just a minute for a little span, and if it's uncomfortable or whatever, you can go right back to how it was. Like you
right,
won't lose your
right.
place in line, right? You can
Yeah,
go right back to your old
yeah,
thing if the new
yeah.
thing doesn't really feel good. And then I remember when I went to the hypnosis meetup where I was for the first time trained a little
Mm,
bit, and they were giving like a kind of standard induction. And when it was my turn to be hypnotized, the sort of consent moment, right, was just someone said like, "Would you like to feel a lot better right now?" Like, who's going to say no to that? Like, what can you say? Like, nah, not really. You know, what? Would you like to taste something really delicious? And would you like to have a beautiful dream? You know, who's going to be like, nah, I'm good. You
Oh no,
know?
but you'd be surprised. There are many who really do not want it.
No, it's not just that. No, it's much more ironic than that. I myself am so confused and grippy about my own pain and history and trauma and stuff that even though I'm aware of these things, there's this incredible ironic kind of backflow,
Right.
that I can sense in myself in a way. So I certainly have compassion for the people like, no, I'm good. Like, yeah, I'm fine, bro. Yeah, I'm gonna go play my video game. I don't need to actually have life or whatever. And no shade on people who play video games, by the way. But yeah. Okay, so wow, there's so much here. Okay, so I want to ask you a couple things. So many things. Okay, we hear a lot of today about altering consciousness, and primarily the method we hear for altering consciousness is drug use.
Yeah, right.
And one of the things that Amen was making clear, and I've heard this before in like traditional Chinese medicine and so forth, is that curing isn't necessarily the goal in medicine. It's not like you have to get rid of something or fight it or attack it, which are sort of more or less modern allopathic medicinal ideas, right? It's more like you just need to rebalance the body, or rebalance the energies in the body. Yes, exactly. And then things will dissolve and change on their own. A sort of a different model. And Amen was talking about this concept in his readings of, I think, Galen, the old Greek texts. So I think it's really weird. I think it's dangerous, actually, that we would sing the praises of intoxicants when we have this other technology that's just we're made of it. It's so natural. It's as organic as your own saliva, right?
Exactly that. Yes.
Why would we want to introduce poisons and antidotes when we have this dreaming way that dissolves consciousness into its sort of originary aspects, allows reformation within that almost alchemical chrysalis, right, of trance, and then naturally, safely we come back, and there's no downside, there's no side effect, So you share this perspective generally?
I generally do, yeah, very much.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like there's no conditions under which we might usefully experiment or be perhaps undergo training or even initiations involving intoxicants. But why would we go there first?
Well, there's certain I mean, for example, in ancient cultures, if they ever would use pharmacology, for example, or any of these types of substances, it would usually be done under very strict conditions after enormous amounts of preparatory work, or leading the individual into a certain state they can enter into themselves, where they fully understand and have fully accepted, and this could take many, many years, of course, fully accepted this fluid aspect of the persona. Persona, mask, literally means a mask. The persona is literally the mask. So the mask we wear, and we're so tightly identified with it, is actually something which is just part of the mystery play. We take it off, we put a different one on. And when you and I, speaking through this conversation, I would say that we are both as aware as each other about all of these aspects we've spoken about. You know, we're aware of this fluid nature of the self. What is the self anyway? All of these questions. And, you know, you sometimes hear these stories, don't you, about, like, I don't know, Timothy Leary and people like this going up to certain gurus in India and saying, "Oh, try this."
You give them 25 hits of LSD.
Exactly, and then you hear these. I don't know whether these are true or false stories.
I think, yeah, there's pretty good evidence for them going like, it's not really any different than how it was before. Nothing changed.
Yeah, what's what's all this about? Well, anybody who's spent time in a natural environment, just staring at the sky, watching the clouds move over them, you know, looking at the flowers grow and die in front of them, sitting in the same place every day, just watching the cycles move, start to become aware of the transitory and illusory nature of this world in any case and our place in it. So it's not going to make that much difference to someone who's been so deeply immersed in the natural world for so long. In fact, they probably see it as a form of violence, maybe, to the self, to hit the conscious awareness.
No, it is violent because trance, the transitions between what we might think of as ordinary or waking consciousness, as it begins to shade gently into trance, and then as it becomes more or less like a mode of sleep or something. I don't know how to put it, actually. It's clumsy language, but that process is relatively natural. Whereas when you take a drug, what happens is like you flip a switch, and your consciousness is forced into some kind of strange to common experience, mode, form, flow, orientation, right? And it's very often especially if you're doing, for example, something like someone smoking DMT. Okay? Often what happens is the person takes a couple of hits and then they're like, oh shit, I'm dead. I'm about to die right now. I'm going to die. And they have the death fear. Right? Whereas I really doubt you're going to have that in trance. I really don't think it's that. There's not that kind of compressed, this is the edge, and across the edge, you know, I'm gone.
No.
It's not like that, at least not in my experience.
No, usually what I explain to people who've never experienced trance before is I just say it's a completely natural state. That's the first thing. It's nothing unusual. It's nothing unnatural. It's not supernatural or anything like that. It's just a completely natural state whereby you will realize that you are completely and utterly comfortably in complete control of where you are. You know, you're in full awareness and you're in complete control. And there is nothing overriding you or causing you to do or be anything which you do not wish to be.
And by the way, that's a complex array. That's a complex cascade of suggestions that you just emitted. I mean, as a hypnotist, I know structurally what is going on there. And I don't disagree. I guess that's a strange thing to say. If we say I don't disagree, what does that really mean? Right, but yeah, I guess what it means is there's more to be said, but that's a very reassuring and gentle preparation for induction or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would just suggest to any therapist out there to sort of take that approach. You know, that there's with complete, you know, one is completely on their own free will and accord subscribing to what it is that they're wishing to achieve. You know, it's not, there's a lot of things which are imposed or suggested to us from the external world, from the media and so on, from films and so on, where
religion.
Yeah, and religion and politics, where it's suggested to us that it's going to do this to you, it's going to cause this harmful effect, it's going to do this, it's going to take over your free will, it's going to, you're going to do things you don't want to do, and all of these sorts of things, which it's really really very harmful, you know, to accept those suggestions, because they're not suggestions which are there to help the individual to find, you know, their true trajectory, their own personal individual true trajectory. It's not. It's that's
No,
what
they
they're
are.
suggesting,
Yes,
away from finding your true trajectory.
yes, and they are toxic in the wrong kind, in the non-medicinal sense, right? In the sense of
Yeah.
poison. You were
Yes.
talking earlier about a concept of temporal synchronization
Yeah.
that reminded me, this is quite some time ago, of the idea of titration in pharmacology, right? It's you get the right, just the right amount
Amount. Yeah.
over the right span of time. You
Right.
need
Yes.
both concepts, right? It's the catalyst and the
Yeah.
tempora, right?
Yes. Yes. So this is interesting because we keep talking about time and we keep talking about space. And the thing is if you look at things again from the ancient mindset, which I quite often do, um, you have obviously the planets, and the planets all represent specific modes of energy and function. The functionality and intelligence of how energy and form, it's almost, they're like the nodes of intelligence that govern form and function
Mm-hmm.
within time and space. And so Saturn, for example, would be the one that governs structure and form and time itself,
Kronos.
Chronos. And so I would say that anyone who was, in the old sense of the word, working with wisdom would be the one who respects Chronos, who has a respect for it, doesn't want to smash Chronos, because the ancients would say, well, if you want to mess with Kronos, Kronos will definitely smash you. You know, like, and so it's a bit like, you know, somebody trying to prove that a brick wall isn't really real by smashing their head into it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to create a very good result. It's going to create probably a horrible result. These things
I mean,
need to
how can
be
you,
respected.
yes, how can you, in a sense, when you say Kronos, it's not merely time. And this is the thing that has become so clear to me over the span since 2018, the absolute primacy of synchronization,
Right.
right? There's so many features. All of biology is hitchhiking on historical iterative paths. They're hitchhiking on each other's sort of effort, and they're hitchhiking on each other's not merely destiny and memory. Like all of the fundamental things are symphonically organized.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do? You're going to go against the root of synchronization? Good luck, because you have to synchronize to do a thing. So if you're going to like fight, you have to synchronize to fight.
Right.
How will
Yeah.
you, yeah, right? It's like you're going to remove the ground from underneath your feet in order to run.
Right. Right.
Right?
Makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it's not going to work. Like, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously humans get angry and hubristic and confused in such a
Yeah.
way that we engage in such ironic, almost if it weren't so dire, it would be comedic,
Mm.
right? If it wasn't so tragic, it would be comical because it's so hyperbolized. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the planets, Kronos, the
Yeah.
intelligences, the nodes, but I think you also meant modes too,
Yes.
maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost as
They
in
can, interchangeable nodes and modes, I would say, are
like almost as in
interchangeable concepts.
the
Yes.
musical modes, right? Ionian,
Yeah. Yeah.
Aeolian,
Yeah. Yeah.
Lydian,
Yeah.
Dorian,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the architectural modes as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So proportion and all of these things and so on and so on. You It's all part of the beautiful way the ancients would see our relationship to time and space
Cosmos.
and cosmos. Yes, yeah, exactly. I don't know if I have satisfactorily answered your first questions really up to this
Somewhat,
point.
yes, somewhat.
Yeah.
But clearly you felt, okay, so there were, it seems like there's at least two important threads, and I think there's a lot of threads, but there are two that stand out. The first is you are discovering your life path. You are uncovering and recovering it, right? And as you are
Yes.
doing this, it becomes clear at some point that your life path, if I'm misstating this, correct me, is
Sure.
involved with assisting others in
Yes.
healing and recovering their life path,
Yes.
and that you
Yes.
have a gift or a mission. You know, I think we do bring to our incarnation this sort of secret little package of, you know, you open up the envelope. Okay, here's, you know, if you are caught or killed, the secretary will disavow any knowledge of your act. Right, the secret sort of mission. That isn't always secret. Sometimes it's not. You know, it's just heartfully obvious.
Well, I would say that it's been shown to me through mnemosyne, you know, and also that is actually um, a function, you know, because you can through resonance through your own path, if it's been so key for yourself, if you as an individual have had these things happening in such a profound way to you, then by default, I would say, like I use that metaphor for plucking a string, causing a vibration, you're going to get others to remember how to vibrate as well and find their own their own. And so really that's what it is. So if you're finding it yourself, you will cause others to resonate with you. I mean, we have these things in our conversations all the time in our language. I resonate with that. I resonate with that. You know, it's really basic but very profound, because this is what it is. This is what it's really about, isn't it? I think. Well, I would say it's about causing everybody to remember where they're going. Really.
I mean, anamnesis might be one of the most profound and significant and compelling
Yeah.
of the fragrances of the soul. And so, to use a different metaphor, like if you've been inside the hive where the honey is, you have that smell on you. And when you're
Right.
walking around in the world, it wafts around, and other
Right.
people are like, wait, there's honey somewhere nearby, right? And they get sort of lit up. And then naturally, there's this distribution, there's a distributive emanation, and a drawing inward too, right? It's both.
Yeah.
It's like breathing, right?
Yeah.
You breathe out and it's distributed. You
Yeah.
breathe in and it's unified. And it unifies in all the people around when the
Right.
in-breath happens, right? It's like little
Right.
star. The nebula congeals again and a star comes to life, right? Something
Yes.
like this.
Yes. And I think we should. I think we should. Those of us who are on such paths that we've discovered, either, you know, those of us who are on such paths that we've discovered, um, we should relax and trust that that's what we're doing. And you know, like all of us of a similar ilk should relax and trust that that is precisely what we're doing. And it will, what you've just described, that is what we're doing. That's what we're here for. Um, to some ears, it may sound a little grandiose, but I think anyone who's really understanding this and going through it uh, can't be, I'm trying to find the right words, can't be dissuaded or discouraged by the ordinary perception of what keeps us inside that crystallized place that everybody accepts as being the place where it's only real if it's this.
Yeah, so let me say a couple things about that.
I haven't really said that very well, but I
No,
think
I
you
think
understand the meaning I'm
let
trying
me
to say here.
reflect it. So let me see if I can reflect it back to you. We can imagine the voice of the crowd, the voice of the common person, and the critical perspective they might direct at such inspired discussion and perspective, right? And they could say, well, yeah, that's grandiose, or that's a bunch of woo.
A bunch of woo as well, easily it can
There's
be
lots
said.
of ways you could that we can imagine a circle of critics, right, would sort of peck at something
Yeah,
they have no knowledge or experience of. Natural for them to be skeptical, right? And they might also say, like, this is how cults get started and blah, blah, blah. It sounds very grandiose. Why do you think you have powers and things? It has not, what we're talking about has nothing to do with any of
no,
those concerns
no,
at all. It's not
no.
related to them in the same way that, like, I don't know, yeah, I'm trying to think of two entirely unrelated things. And the problem when you start to do that is that you always find a relation. You can find some relation between any two things. So I won't give an example, but it's not related in the sense that, first of all, someone who's authentically seeking anamnesis, healing, and medicine for others, the nectar of our origin and purpose, anyone who's authentically seeking these things will either get in a lot of trouble very quickly, or they will become very humble.
Yeah.
So it's not like the ego. Yes, of course you can have grandiosity, but in the quest for Mnemosyne's kiss, right?
Right.
Your
That's a lovely way of
arrogance,
putting it.
your arrogance will deprive you of everything you hope for. And
Yes,
you will
exactly.
quickly learn this. If you started out arrogant, like, and I have certainly had some arrogance in my life, right? So I've suffered. I know what I'm talking about here. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you'll eventually you'll be made diaphanous. Your ego will become diaphanous, and you'll realize, like, this isn't about Darren at all. This has
Yeah.
very little to do with Darren. Darren is sort of like the name painted on the ship's bow, underneath
Yeah.
Mnemosyne's
Yeah.
statue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's, so vital and
Mm.
shining. And yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so we call the ship Darren, but it's not, yeah, you see my point.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally, absolutely. I mean, this is why I said earlier, we talk about the self, but what, and there's that old famous phrase, before you enter the temple, you must know thyself. But like,
That almost means like to
but what self, what is the self that you must know?
right. I mean, it's almost like saying, before you enter, before you go into the entrance of the cave, divest yourself of the costume of personal
Right.
identity. That's what
Yeah.
know yourself
Yeah.
probably mostly means, or at least that's a very useful angle on the question, right? Without saying this is what the question's answer is, because that would be clumsy and crude, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Because the answer is nuanced and many petaled, right? Like a flower, many
Absolutely.
petaled answer.
Hmm.
How do you feel about taking a pause here?
Yeah, yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that.
Okay.
That would be wonderful, and I'm very happy to do this
Reconvene?
again.
Yes, as am
Absolutely.
I, in the near
Yeah,
term future.
in the near future, when the time is convenient for both of us, we will definitely do this again. That would be really, really good. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for this time. Oh my goodness, what a nourishing and inspiring conversation this has been.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. All blessings
Okay.
to you. Till
Blessings to
next
you. Yes.
we meet. And do I have your permission to post this? Is it okay?
Sure, sure, sure.
Excellent.
I think we actually did what we came here to do.
Yeah, me too. And I'm just so excited. Yeah, thank you so much, Lee.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Me
Okay. Bye
too.
now. Bye.
Peace for now.
Bye bye.